Welcome to Life Story Lounge. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story. If you love inspiring stories, please subscribe and let's get started.
Obinna Okafor, a man whose tailored suits were as sharp as his business instincts, stood in the dock, his hands gripping the mahogany railing until his knuckles turned ivory white. He had spent his entire life building a labyrinth of wealth, a fortress of influence that had allowed him to bypass the rules, dodge the laws, and steamroll anyone who dared stand in his path. He was a lion in the corporate jungle of Lagos, a predator who had never known the feeling of being hunted. But today, the hunter was a young woman in a black robe whose face was as impassive as stone.
Mr. Okafor, you have built an empire on the foundation of stolen pensions, forged land titles, and the silent suffering of families who believed in your integrity. You thought that because you had money, you were beyond the reach of the law.
Obinna stared at her, his pulse throbbing in his throat. He had been so confident. He had bribed the prosecutor, intimidated the witnesses, and ensured that the chair of the tribunal would be someone he could manipulate. But this judge, she was a new appointment, a prodigy from the north who had been parachuted into the position with a reputation for being incorruptible.
Justice is not a commodity, Mr. Okafor. And today, the market is closed.
She picked up her pen, signed the document, and looked at him for one final lingering moment. In that glance, Obinna felt a tremor of something he hadn't felt in 20 years. A haunting, phantom recognition. Her eyes tilted slightly at the corners, the bridge of her nose, the way she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. It hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. It was a face from a dream he had spent decades trying to forget.
I hereby sentence you to 20 years in Kirikiri maximum security prison, with no option of a fine.
As the bailiffs clamped the cold, heavy steel of the handcuffs around his wrists, Obinna's knees buckled. Not because of the prison time. He had survived crises before, but because as the judge stood up to exit, he saw a small silver locket hanging from her neck. It was shaped like a half moon, exactly like the one he had given to a young, vibrant woman named Amaka in a small village in Enugu 5 years ago, before he had traded his heart for a seat at the table of the elite. The transition from a penthouse in Banana Island to a cramped concrete cell in Kirikiri was not just a change of scenery. It was a cosmic joke. Obinna sat on his thin mattress, the smell of damp concrete and stagnant water filling his senses. He was a man who owned entire blocks of high-rises, now reduced to a 4x4 square of misery. He had to know. The suspicion was a fire burning in his gut, consuming him more than the confinement. He spent his first week bribing a guard with the last of his hidden resources, an expensive wristwatch he had managed to smuggle in, just to get access to a library book and a pen. He needed to write a letter. When the letter was finally delivered to the judge's chambers, it wasn't a plea for mercy. It was 3 words. Do you know Amaka? A week later, he was granted a private visitation in the prison's bleak, grey meeting room. Judge Ifeoma Ekweme sat on the other side of the reinforced glass, her expression unreadable. She looked older than her 21 years, her gaze still sharp, but now the coldness was replaced by a simmering, volcanic rage. You recognized the locket, she stated. Not as a question, but as if. Obinna leaned forward, his voice a gravelly whisper. Ifeoma, is it really you? How? I thought your mother told me you had passed away shortly after I left for Lagos. Ifeyoma let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. My mother told you I died. Oh, Mr. Okafor, your talent for deception truly knows no bounds. My mother didn't tell you I died. She told you I had died because you were a man who traded his soul for a suit. And she knew you'd never return for a child you viewed as an obstacle to your upward mobility. She chose to raise me in the dirt rather than let you turn me into a replica of your greed. Obinna pleaded, his composure shattering. I wanted to come back. I was going to send for you both as soon as I hit my first million. The standard lie of the Lagos tycoon, Ifeoma remarked, her fingers tapping against the metal counter. You hit your first million, then your first billion, and yet you never stopped to look back. You built your empire over the graves of people like my mother. You cheated the poor. You destroyed the vulnerable, and you lived in a house of gold while we slept under a leaky roof. I am your father, he whispered, his eyes filled with tears that looked remarkably real. You are the defendant, she corrected. And the fact that you are my father is the reason why I refuse to recuse myself from your case. I wanted to see you sit in that dock. I wanted to see if you would recognize me. I wanted to see if the man who abandoned his daughter 5 years ago would finally, for once, look at a woman not as a tool, but as a person. The meeting ended abruptly, leaving Obinna alone in the silence of the prison, the walls closing in. He had won the game of life, only to lose everything that was supposed to make the win worthwhile. Months bled into years. Obinna's wealth evaporated as the government seized his assets, and the loyal friends he had wined and dined vanished like smoke. But in the deep, dark quiet of his cell, a strange transformation began. Stripped of his suits, his cars, and his sycophants, Obinna Okafor started to look at the world differently. He saw the men in prison, young boys who had been led astray by the same predatory business world he had once dominated. He began to teach them how to read, how to manage the little money they had, and how to understand the law that had locked them away. He became a mentor, a philosopher of the incarcerated. The guards started calling him the Sage of Block B. One day, Ifeoma returned. She wasn't wearing her robe. She was in casual clothes, and she looked tired. She sat down, looking at him through the glass. He had aged significantly, his hair a shock of white, his face etched with the lines of hard labor and harder reflection. I reviewed your appeal, she said, her voice softer than before. Obinna didn't look up. I don't need an appeal, Ifeoma. I deserve this place. I built a monument to my own vanity, and now I'm living in the ruins. That response, Ifeoma noted, is not the response of a man who still wants to bypass the rules. I'm a different man, Ifeoma, he said, and for the first time, he didn't try to sound like a billionaire. I'm just a man who realized that his daughter became the best version of him, even though he tried to be the worst version of himself. Ifeoma paused, her gaze softening. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, old, dog-eared photograph. It was a picture of Obinna as a young, ambitious man, standing next to Amaka, both of them laughing in front of a small, mud brick house in Enugu. My mother died last year, Ifeoma said, her voice thick with emotion. She didn't die hating you. She died hoping that one day you would stop running. Obinna sobbed, a deep, guttural sound that rattled the small room. He looked at the photo, the image of a life he had discarded. I spent my life trying to outrun that boy, he said. I thought he was weak. I thought he was poor. I thought he was a loser. He was the only one of you who was happy. The twist in the tale came not from the court, but from the prison's infirmary. Obinna had fallen ill, a result of years of high-stress living and the harsh conditions of prison life. He was fading, his strength leaving him like water through a sieve. Ifeoma visited him daily, not as a judge, but as a daughter, a complicated, bruised, but present daughter. I have a secret, Papa, she said one afternoon, leaning close to the glass as he lay in the infirmary bed. The 20 million naira you hid in the offshore account in the Caymans, the one you thought the government couldn't trace. Obinna blinked, his eyes cloudy. I told the authorities that money was gone. I destroyed the access codes. I know, Ifeoma smiled, a genuine, warm smile. But you didn't destroy them well enough. I found them. I used every cent of that money to buy back the lands you stole from those families in the East. I returned the deeds to them. I built a school on the site of your old factory. Obinna let out a wheezing, broken laugh. You are a terrible judge, Ifeoma. You are supposed to be impartial. You just laundered stolen money. I'm a Nigerian judge, she chuckled, her eyes sparkling. I believe in restorative justice. Obinna looked at her, his heart swelling with a pride so intense it masked the pain in his chest. I built an empire, Ifeoma, but I didn't build anything that lasted. You are the only legacy I have, and you are doing it so much better than I ever did. You're not dying today, Papa, she said, her tone hardening into her judicial authority. You have work to do. There's a lawyer coming tomorrow to help you apply for parole. You are going to get out and you are going to help me run the foundations. We have a lot of corn to plant. Obinna shook his head, a faint, humorous glint returning to his eyes. You're going to make a prisoner do community service? I'm going to make a father redeem himself, she said. The day Obinna Okafor stepped out of Kirikiri 20 years later, he wasn't the lion of Lagos. He was a frail, white-haired man in a simple linen shirt. There were no cameras, no flashbulbs, and no business associates waiting to greet him. There was only Ifeoma waiting by the gate with a thermos of tea and a car that looked like it had seen better decades. He climbed into the car, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked at the sprawling city of Lagos, the place that had once been his playground, his battlefield, and his prison. Where to, Papa? Ifeoma asked, starting the engine. Obinna looked out at the horizon, at the chaotic, beautiful, and unforgiving city. To the market, Ifeoma. I have a sudden craving for roasted corn. They drove to the market, the same market where he had spent years trying to erase his footprints. He walked to a stall, sat on a wooden stool, and looked at the woman behind the fire. She looked exactly like Amaka. "1 ear, please," he said, his voice steady. As the woman roasted the corn, Obinna looked at Ifeoma, who was standing beside him, her hand on his arm. He realized then that life wasn't about the gold-leafed gates or the mahogany desks. It was about the moments you didn't have to lie to enjoy. He took a bite of the corn, the heat and the flavor hitting him with the force of a memory. He laughed. Not the hollow, predatory laugh of a CEO, but the deep, resonant laugh of a man who had finally come home. You know, Ifeoma, he said, turning to his daughter. I really was a very stupid man. You were a very successful idiot, Papa, she agreed, passing him a cup of tea. But you're a much better person now, even if you do still have terrible tasting snacks.
The crowd in the market looked at them. A judge and a reformed convict, an old man and his daughter, and saw nothing special. They didn't see the billionaire who had tried to build a kingdom, or the girl from the village who had brought him to his knees. They just saw a father and daughter enjoying a simple, honest meal in the heart of the city. And for Obinna, that was the most interesting, the most engaging, and the most emotional twist of all. He had sought power and found only emptiness. He had sought legacy and found only ruins.
But in the end, he had lost his freedom only to find his life. He had been sentenced by the daughter he never knew, and in doing so, he had been liberated by the daughter he finally earned. As the sun began to set over the bustling market, casting long golden shadows across the ground, Obinna leaned back and sighed. He had no penthouse, no shipping empire, and no gold-leafed gates. He had a stool, a corn cellar, and his daughter. And as the smoke from the charcoal fire drifted into the cool evening air, he knew he was finally, perfectly, exactly where he was meant to be. The story of Obinna
Okafor wouldn't be told in the business sections of the newspapers or the halls of the corporate elite. It would be told in the quiet corners of the village, in the lessons he taught the young men in prison, and in the quiet pride in his daughter's eyes. He had learned the hardest lesson of all, that you can fool the world, you can bribe the law, and you can outrun your past, but you can never, ever outrun the truth. And in the final chapter of his life, the truth didn't taste like ash. It tasted like roasted corn, sweet, simple, and perfectly honest. He was Obinna Okafor, the man who had been sentenced to life, only to finally begin living it.
Hope you enjoyed the story and subscribe to Life Story Lounge and share in the comments the lesson you learned today.